technologies are empowering, enabling, and really demanding greater servant leadership. What hasn't changed is the principles of leadership. It's okay to feel overwhelmed when you're in a revolution, and we are in a revolution. And I'm going to compare and contrast the social media revolution with another great revolution, the American Revolution. You don't have to have a designated title to be a leader. Because of the social media technologies available today, you can connect with anyone, anywhere, anytime, who has a passion for what you believe in. Those people who have the similar passions to you are your tribe. And he says it's tribes that are going to change the world, not money, not factories. You can change the world with social media. We're seeing it happen. One quick example, Kleenex, the great paper tissue company, right? They were destroying century-old, old-growth natural forests. As you can imagine, Greenpeace didn't like this very much. So Greenpeace sort of sabotaged a social media mission that Kleenex did. Kleenex set up couches in the middle of Times Square, New York City, and said, let it out. They grabbed people off the street, put them on the couch with a box of tissues, and said, let it out. Tell us what you're sad about. Tell us what you are, what really moves you. And they were trying to get people to start crying. So this whole social media campaign, they said, let it out, And they were capturing people on the street. Well, Greenpeace got wind of it, and they sort of sabotaged it. They put plants in there. And so the people sat down on the couches and they started saying, I miss my family members who are so far away. They started hearing, you could see the director leaning in, the camera's getting really close, and they're getting really excited. This is going to be a good one. And then all of a sudden they say, but what really makes me angry is when Kleenex starts cutting down old growth trees and being so proud about it. And of course you saw them draw back, and oh no. And Greenpeace had their own cameras there, so there's a YouTube campaign on this. And it worked. They basically took the social media campaign that Kleenex planned, turned it around on them, and as a result, Kleenex changed their practices. They're no longer doing the clear cutting of those old growth trees. But maybe you don't need to care, right? There's a lot of naysayers out there about social media. There's a lot of people who say, it's just a fad. The favorite term in business is there's no ROI, return on investment. Whatever money you invest in social media, you're not going to get it back. And that just cracks me up, because you think of traditional marketing messages, like TV broadcasts, billboards, you've never been able to track your return on investment in those fields like you can track the return on investment in social media. But maybe you don't need to care, right? Maybe you don't care that there's over 900 million users on Facebook. I'm sure there's no return on investment from connecting with 900 million users. Maybe you don't care about the fact that people are willing to generate content completely for free because they're passionate about it, because they love their tribe, because they love their stakeholders. 2.25 million pages, that's what Wikipedia would be if you printed it out. All generated completely for free because people are advocates about what they believe. Just a fad. No ROI on that. Nielsen, who's actually the classic marketing study organization of the old world marketing, did a study on trust, and they do this every year. And they discovered that 92% of people, and that number is rising, would rather listen to a complete stranger's opinion about a product than listen to what the paid marketers say. But again, just a fad, ROI, nothing really there, right? So forget all the metrics for a minute. The real reason you should care is social media gives you the opportunity, and you have the passion. You can merge your passion with that opportunity to help change the world. We can all learn from our failures, right? So when we go through these today, know that I'm looking at point-in-time examples of these individuals. Don't mistake what I'm saying as though these are bad individuals. I'm grateful to them for the opportunity to learn from their mistakes and show them here. I'm a big fan of acronyms. Some people think they're a little cheesy. It's the best way for me to remember. So when I realized the similarities between the American Revolution and the social media revolution, I took the word social and fit it into it, basically. Okay. Now, I do have it backwards, and that's intentional. I did it intentionally this way because listening comes first. So the first example is listening. James Otis, the British politician on the left here, said no taxation without representation. But because they didn't have any say in what the taxes were, it was tyranny. Take that in contrast with what King George III said when the war began. He said, well, it's done. Now the colonies must either submit or triumph. They still weren't listening. That's what started the whole American Revolution, was because Britain refused to listen to the people. Take that to today. How do you listen in social media? Chris Brogan is a real thought leader in social media. Chris says you have to create a listening station. He says what you need to do is have a way of compiling all that information about your brand, your tribe, your stakeholders, whatever it is you're passionate about, compile it all in one location so that you can listen most effectively. Unfortunately, Ketchum and Conagra Foods, Ketchum is a PR firm, public relations firm, and they were representing Marie Callender's brand food. They didn't do that. What they did was they set up, and you can just sort of walk through it with me, they set up this great opportunity. They were really excited about this idea. They said, okay, we're going to invite some of the biggest foodies out to a fancy restaurant. We're going to set the scene. We're going to have people come out and join us, and they're going to bring a guest. They'll be candlelit, and we'll have a celebrity chef cook them this amazing meal. And then at the end, we'll surprise them that the main course was actually a microwavable meal that we make, right? Now, if you're a foodie, any foodies in the crowd? Anybody? All right, great. Do you think you would like that if you were suddenly surprised and said, yeah, I didn't think so. So they didn't eat it, right? At the end of the meal, they say, guess what? This is actually a microwavable meal. The foodies weren't happy about it. So as a result, it went very negatively because they didn't listen to their audience first. So how do you listen in social media? 3 quick options here. The top is Google Alerts. Google Alerts is totally free. You can sign up for it, and you can basically say, anytime this keyword is mentioned, let me know. Anytime Google indexes new content on this topic, let me know. The second, and so that's not real time, right? Google Alerts is not real time. It's as it indexes over time. The second is more real time, and this is Hootsuite. There's also a similar product called TweetDeck. If you're not familiar with it, basically what it does is it's a similar approach. You take it and you tell it keywords you want it to follow. And then whenever somebody mentions those keywords in Twitter or Facebook or any of the social media, it streams it more or less real time. And the last is Radiant 6. The first 2 are totally free. The last is Radiant 6. This is a paid service, and it's much more corporate. It's for larger organizations. And it offers tools like analytics and content sharing. So if you see something you want to share with somebody, you can pass it along. You guys see the flow here? We're going American Revolution, social media revolution, and then some tools and techniques. I'll try and go a little bit more quickly though. Action-oriented. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Who hasn't heard that expression, right? It was 2 if by sea. So Paul Revere and his crew said that they wanted to be action-oriented. And this is the way the American Revolution went, right? They said, as soon as we see those British troops moving, we need to alert the folks across the river in case we get arrested. We want to make sure this message gets out. We want to be fast and quick about it. So as soon as they determined the British troops were moving north across the sea, they put up 2 lanterns in the Old North Church to alert the backup riders on the other side of the river. They didn't sit down and write out a memo. They didn't sit down and say, here's the reasons why we think of this, and don't hold us legally responsible if we're wrong, and here's our privacy policy. No. They took action. They said immediately, boom, 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 go do it. And they were successful, right? The second is Lord Cornwallis. Early on in the American Revolution, Lord Cornwallis had Washington and its troops backed up against the Hudson River in New York. With 1 stroke, very early on, he could have ended the American Revolution by attacking that night. He is said to have said, we'll go bag the old fox in the morning, right? Well, what happened overnight was a heavy fog rolled in. Washington took advantage of it, left a couple of troops behind to keep fires burning, make it look like they were still there, while the rest of the army escaped over the Hudson River. Saved the American Revolution because he wasn't action-oriented. Today, how do we use social media revolution? Cory Booker is the mayor of New York, New Jersey. Picture this, it's winter of 2010. There's a blizzard that everybody's been talking about for days coming. What does Cory Booker do? He grabs 2 items. His mobile phone, his smartphone, and his shovel. And he goes and hits the streets of Newark, New Jersey. And he listens to people who are saying, my street still isn't plowed, and he goes and directs plow crews out to it. He listens to people who say things like, help, I need out, I've got a surgery coming up and I need to get there. And he goes to that person's house, digs out her car, and tweets back, "You're all set, good luck." Now that's action-oriented, right? Then you compare that with Kenneth Cole. Kenneth Cole is a great fashion designer, done many great things, but he made one mistake as the Arab Spring was breaking out in Cairo, in Egypt, and there was a lot of riots and uprising. He did what's known as hashtag hijacking in Twitter. So he wrote something along the lines of, "Word is that there's an uprising in Cairo, Egypt. We believe it's because they're anxious for our new fashion line coming out." Now, you can imagine the folks there weren't too happy about it, right? He sent that tweet out. It was about 6 hours later before that sincere, heartfelt apology came out. Now, 6 hours in the old world would be nothing, right? That's pretty quick. In social media time, what happened during those 6 hours? Somebody created another Twitter account called Kenneth Cole PR to make fun of him. Other people picked up on it, including major news outlets like Huffington Post, New York Daily Times, CNBC. Within 6 hours, there was press everywhere about this terrible tweet by Kenneth Cole. You have to be fast in social media times. So how do you be action-oriented? This is the Super Bowl monitoring station, what you're looking at here. And basically, the monitoring station itself is just like the listening we talked about earlier. The key differentiator here between the action orientation and listening is they also train all of their monitors heavily. So whenever there is something like a traffic backup mentioned on Twitter or Facebook, they know to alert the police. Maybe there's an accident in such and such area, or there's a backup, can you reroute traffic? So they train their people to be action-oriented. Next is integrity. Patrick Henry said to the Virginia delegates, "Give me liberty or give me death," in a rising speech that is tributed with how they got the Virginia colony to give the Virginia troops to the Revolution. In contrast, the British had Bannister Tarleton, and I probably butchered his name ironically because he was known as the Butcher. Bannister Tarleton, if you ever saw the Mel Gibson movie The Patriot, the chief antagonist in that, Colonel Tabington, is modeled after this guy. But the American account of the Battle of Waxhaw was that the colonists, the patriots, tried to surrender, and he ran them over with his men as they were waving the white flags. So he was obviously didn't practice a whole lot of integrity as a leader. Today, in social media, Michael Hyatt, the gentleman on the left, I'm a big fan of Thomas Nelson Publishers. He was the CEO of Thomas Nelson. Before I started following his blog, I never cared who the publisher of a book was. If I liked the book, I bought it. If I didn't, I didn't. Now it's the second thing I look at. If the book has something I'm interested in, the title, I turn it over and see who published it. And if it's a Thomas Nelson book, I know that they have a great deal of integrity because I know who their CEO is and how he practices integrity in everything he does. On the right is the former CEO of Whole Foods, where he fell down, and one of his failures was on the Yahoo Finance discussion group. For years, there was somebody just sending comments out there by the name of Rahodeb. And Rahodeb was a big fan of Whole Foods. He was not a fan of Whole Foods competitors. And later, you find out Rahodeb's also a pretty big fan of the CEO guy. Not surprisingly, because they found out in a federal study, it was him. He was pretending to be somebody else anonymously, trying to convince financiers and investors to invest in Whole Foods. So how do we practice integrity? In this case, it's all about who you recruit or who you hire. You need to make sure you're getting people with the same values. You can train for skills. You cannot train for values and ethics. Connect. Paul Revere, we mentioned earlier, Malcolm Gladwell in his book called The Tipping Point talks about Paul Revere and William Dawes. William Dawes took the same ride that night as Paul Revere, but he's a little less known. One of the reasons why that is because Paul Revere was a connector. Paul Revere was known for associating with many different social groups of the time. As a result, while William Dawes rode south over the land route that night, he alerted far fewer people because they were all sort of in the same clique, the same network. Paul Revere was reaching out to more networks, more groups, and as a result, more people were alerted as those groups expanded their alerts to different groups. On the British side of this equation, where they failed, or one of their challenges, I guess is probably a better way of putting it, they basically had to depend on what were known as loyalists in the time. The Patriots had a broad base of individuals who were revolutionaries, who were opposed to the British. The British had a smaller group of loyalists who tended to be the wealthy, and they had to support those loyalists as they went through the revolution. That number dwindled, obviously, as the British lost more and more. Now, whatever your political affiliation, you can't deny the fact that Barack Obama changed the game in politics when it comes to social media, right? 5 million followers on Facebook during the election, 5.4 million people clicked, I voted for Barack Obama. He knew how to connect more effectively than any other politician before him on social media. Compare that with how a company, another PR firm, public relations company, called BrainLink Communications messed up with a blogger called the Bloggess. Well, BrainLink Communications was promoting the Kardashian sisters. I honestly don't remember which one, I don't follow the Kardashians, but they basically were trying to get the Bloggess to write about some fashion item that one of the Kardashian girls was wearing. The Bloggess has a bit of integrity and says, just because you tell me and are trying to promote this product, I'm not going to write about it. So she sends back a snarky response to the PR firm. A VP of that BrainLink Communications hits reply all on the email, saying, what a fucking bitch, pardon the expression. The Bloggess is nice still, right? Relatively speaking. She sends another snarky response just back to that group. She still hasn't told anybody in her network, still hasn't opposed anything, still hasn't broadcast it. Basically says, I can't believe you've done this. I can't believe, do you even consider yourself a PR firm? You know, because you're supposed to know how to manage public relations. And by the way, hitting reply all, cursing somebody out is not a good way to do that. And then she still lets it go. The VP doesn't let it go. He replies back again. Starts off kind of nice, but then in the middle says, maybe you should consider yourself flattered we even consider writing to you. So now she's had it, right? She says, I'll show you how flattered I am. And she sends a message out to her 164,000 followers about what this PR firm did. How do we connect using social media tools? Well, what you hear is actually a LinkedIn map of my network. The key is to have this sort of concept in your head. Not that you have to necessarily use this tool, right? But if you're looking for somebody who's going to reach out to a broader base, then you want to consider that as a part of what you're looking for when you're recruiting and hiring. Being open. This is all about transparency. The signers of the Declaration of Independence, all 56 of them, were obviously very open. And then in the British side, William Howe and Henry Clinton were two military leaders. They didn't necessarily share their plans with the rest of the British Army because they were more interested in their own personal motives. William Howe was ordered to go north up the Hudson River and support another attack to secure the Hudson River. He failed to do that. He kind of kept it. He instead wanted to take Philadelphia. There was much more glamour in it. As a result, the British lost control of the Hudson River, a critical supply chain. And then Henry Clinton, he preferred to run his operations out of New York. When Cornwallis was cornered in Yorktown, he said, I need support, I need troops. And Clinton kept saying, I'll send troops, I'll send troops, I'll send troops. He never sent them until it was too late. And as a result, we all know Cornwallis fell at Yorktown. Basically the beginning of the end for the British and the American Revolution. Being open in business today and social media, imagine you're Domino's Pizza, right? And you've got a lot of bad press out there about your quality of ingredients, but you're still making money. What do you care, right? Patrick Doyle, then president of North America for Domino's Pizza, said, I care, and I want to share this with the world. They actually created a site that consolidated all those bad comments, all the video footage of people talking bad about their products and posted it out there to the world and said, yep, we got a problem and we're going to fix it. They were very open about this. Compare that with Senator Mike Perry in Minnesota. Again, Senator, I'm sure he's done a million wonderful things. When he was about to win the election, or thought he had a real chance of winning that election, he decided to go back and scrub all of his comments. What might he have said that offended somebody? Well, this one in particular was deleted. It said, read the exclusive on Mr. Owen Newsweek. He is a power-hungry, arrogant black man. As you can imagine, people didn't like that one very much. He deleted it, but it was too late. His comments ranged in the beginning from denying he ever posted it, to denying he ever deleted it, saying he didn't even know how to delete a tweet, to ultimately coming around and saying, yeah, I posted it, I deleted it, whatever. That's not very open. You have to be open in the world of social media. Very transparent, because people will find out about you. It's just the reality. This is the new world we live in. Culture matters when it comes to being open. Never before have you had to be as concerned about the culture in your organization. It's always been important, but you used to be able to mask it. You used to be able to have that firewall, that barrier up there that said, what we do inside, nobody will see outside. That's no longer the case. Your friends, your employees, your stakeholders, they're all out there online, and they're all sharing information about this culture. Most organizations start in social media with a single person who's responsible for that social media, and they're drinking from the fire hose, right? There's all this information coming. They can only handle so much. Then they go to a team-based approach, and they say, okay, we need more people to support this. And they get a team going. But ultimately, what you really want is a culture where you can entrust and empower the entire organization, your entire tribe, all of your stakeholders, to say and act the right way in social media. Okay, and then we come down to the last one, we come down to serve. Obviously, the Americans, George Washington was a great example. Lafayette, who was a trusted right-hand advisor to Washington from France, is a little less known in America. But he actually gave up everything he had in France. On his own personal dime, traveled to America. He said, I want to work for free. I believe so much in what you're doing here in America that I want to work for free. I want to volunteer my time. The same thing George Washington said. He said, I'll work for free. I want to work for free. And then in Britain, when King George heard after the American Revolution, he asked an American there, what will Washington do? But the American said, well, they say he's going to resign his post and go back to his farm, which is what Washington actually did first. And King George said, if he does that, he's the greatest man alive. Because nobody had ever seen that. Nobody had ever seen somebody take so much power and have so much control and authority and then just relinquish it. But that's exactly what George Washington did. He actually resigned his post, gave it back to the colonists and said, you know what, I've done my duty, I want to go back and be a simple farmer. It wasn't until months later, after the badgering of many, that he went back into politics and ultimately became the president. He was a servant leader. How do you translate that to today's examples? Tony Hsieh is the CEO of Zappos.com. I'm a big fan of Zappos.com. I got a chance to visit their offices. They have a servant leadership mentality. If you're looking for a great book on servant leadership in modern corporations, the book Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh is a fantastic one to read. Basically, they are constantly focused on how they serve their customers and their employees. First, in their customers, they offer free coaching advice to their employees. They offer free coaching to the employees. Now, this could be confidential if you want. It can be public if you want. One person said, I became a better dad. One person said, I grew my biceps by 2 inches. There's all kinds of great examples. Some were company focused, some were entirely personal focused. They also offer all kinds of things like free food. And then how they treat their customers is similar. They do things with their customers like somebody may call in with absolutely no interest in ordering a product, and they'll just talk to them. The longest call on record when I was there was 8.5 hours with a customer who never bought a thing. 8.5 hours. They have a slogan that says, we're a service company, we just happen to sell goods. They know how to serve employees and serve customers. As a result, Amazon bought them recently. Contrast that with Bob Nardelli. Bob Nardelli was the CEO of Home Depot and Chrysler in 2 very dark times. Now, Bob Nardelli, when he was at Home Depot, he reserved, I think it was 9 parking spaces for himself, right by the elevator, and then he had the elevator customized so it went straight up to his penthouse office. He didn't want to talk to any employees or customers. He replaced a lot of the highly knowledgeable individuals on the work floor with a lot of experience to the lowest possible pay he could. And he also reduced the staffing numbers at each of the stores. Here was the problem. He focused on one particular stakeholder group, the investors. He was so narrowly focused on them that he benefited them at the cost of all other stakeholders. And of course, the model for servant leadership, we've talked about this a lot, and you're going to get, I suspect there'll be some more great talks on servant leadership today too. So I'm not going to cover this too much, but my blog, modernservantleader.com, has lots of material on it as well. Please feel free to visit it. We deal with it as basically the pyramid flipped on the top, right? And I argue that servant leadership is the only real form of leadership. Because if you're self-serving, you're not leading anybody, right? If you're serving others and you're leading others, then you're leading. So, just a quick recap. Listen. Make sure you listen to your stakeholders in your tribe. Be action-oriented. Don't just listen. You have to be ready to respond very quickly in the world of social media. Practice integrity. People will know if you don't. People will know if you're not practicing integrity. Connect. Understand your connections, where they do lap or overlap with others. Be open. Be transparent about your intentions and your perspectives. And make sure you practice your leadership.